Thank y'all. Just a reminder, if we can save some of the chairs in the back for other people, if you can fill up a little more in front, that'd be great, but I appreciate you all coming out. All right. Yes, that's it. All right, everybody. We'll be starting soon. Wait until I see eyeballs. All right. Welcome. Hi, everybody. How's it going? All right, before I start with the beginning of our amazing town hall, it's such a great turnout, I want to thank everybody for coming out. Let's get a show of hands. How many people here are from Natick proper? How many people are from Framingham? There it is. How many people are from Ashland? How many people from Wayland? Wellesley? I mean, we got, anybody I'm missing, just feel free. Awesome. Well, this is great. What this shows is that this is not just a Natick event. This is an event for the whole Metro West region, because what we're hoping tonight becomes is to be one of many conversations we'll have from here on out about the Green New Deal and about the way we as a community decide to affect climate change. Now, you're probably wondering who I am, the guy with the black t-shirt up front. My name is Kyle Richard, and I'm the hub coordinator of Sunrise Metro West. Before I give you a little bit more, I want to thank all of the panelists that will be joining us today. I want to thank State Senator Becca Rausch, Craig Altimos from 350 Massachusetts, Jillian Wilson-Martin, Natick's own Sustainability Coordinator, Elisa Landry from Mass Audubon, and Casey Townsend from Natick Community Organic Farm. I also want to give a shout out to our small but mighty planning team. We have Debbie in the back there. She's one of our, Debbie Marion. We got Ian Meverach from the Common Street Spiritual Center to my left. And Steve Jerome, who's one of our runners, who's in the back there from All Revolution Metro West. So that shows you that we are a partnership. We are a community. We're people from varied communities, varied positions. We have lots of ideas and solutions, but today we're here to kind of join on this very important issue. And the reason why I'm up here is not because I hold a specific distinction. I'm not a doctor or anything like that. I don't have a special title, and nor do I work currently in climate change. I'm just a resident from Natick who, like many of you, have read the articles, watched the videos, saw the polar bears on the ice caps, and saw the forest fires happening in California, and was generally nervous and afraid for my future. Not only that, but climate change has this weird way of being a big problem of making us all feel alone. And for me, that all changed when I went to a town hall in South Boston with the Sunrise Movement in Boston. Did anybody go to that event? Okay, so some did, that's great. Well, hopefully this will be a version of that here. And from there on, I decided not only do I want to do what Sunrise does, I want to do it where I live. So I became the guy with the shirt. Right? I became the guy who went to meetings with my shirt on. The guy who went to community organizations with his shirt on. Went to schools and talked with my shirt. I went to community meetings and board meetings and all this stuff. And I don't have any special qualifications other than being present and speaking on behalf of my own issues and my own community. And so I wanted to let you know that you too could be the person in the shirt today. You too can be the person that decides that enough's enough. I want to join my friends, my communities, and my neighbors to make real change happen. And I hope that's why you're here tonight. Awesome. So without further ado, our headliners are to my right, you're at the stage left. I want you to give a really big round of applause for our presenters. They worked really hard to get their presentations ready today. From Natick High School, we got Chloe Carr and Hannah Weatherby. And from Walnut Hill School for the Arts, we got Olivia Nam, Naomi Burrell, and Geffen Moore. And I think what we're going to all find today is that those that are leading, those that should lead, are the young people. Because this is their future. And so what I hope is that you can open ears and hear their voices because it's important. Some side things to note. We're a different town hall than the rest. We're not going to be doing open questions. We have runners out to the sides. Raise your hand if you're a runner. And they have index cards and pens and pencils. If a question strikes you, flag one of the runners and they will give you a card and a pencil, and that will be added to the list of questions we will add to our discussion later today. Okay, does everybody get that point? Cool, ready to go? All right, let's hear from our presenters.
So, hi. My name is Olivia, and I go by Ollie. I'm from Walnut Hill School for the Arts, and I study visual art. I'm 16 years old, and I'm from the United States and Korea. I'm here because I want to change our future, that we could live longer and a better life.
Hi, my name is Geffen Moore. I'm a sophomore studying visual art at Walnut Hill, and I'm from New Jersey. And ever since coming to Walnut Hill last year, I've really realized what it's like to be independent and what it means to be a global citizen. And I really want to use my voice to be the change for the future and protect my future.
I'm from Bermuda, and yeah, and I'm from Walnut Hill. I'm a dance major, and I'm here today to change the course of history. And yeah.
So we're gonna watch the video. Yeah.
I honestly can't remember the first time I learned about climate change. It's always been there. But I do remember writing a research paper my sophomore year, and it clicked that climate change touches everything I know. I used to feel pretty alone in my fear for this crisis, but we do not have to be alone. When we act together, we can find hope and we can find power. On September 20th, myself and other young leaders across the United States are leading mass strikes to launch the era of the Green New Deal and demand our political leaders take serious action on the climate crisis. Already, 1.4 million students have participated in mass strikes. Now it's time to work together on the biggest climate strikes yet. We need you to be there with us. By striking, we will refuse to go to school, because preparing for our future in this moment means fighting for one that's actually livable. We will refuse to go to work because those in power are not working to stop this existential crisis. And we will refuse to go forward with business as usual, because business as usual is killing our planet. Our global climate strikes will march in the footsteps of historical movements to transform society with mass non-cooperation. With the Green New Deal, we are ready to finish the unfinished business of these movements. When we demand climate action that pushes forward economic justice. We demand climate action that fixes the injustices of racial discrimination. And we demand climate action that ensures dignity and prosperity for all. It's now our generation's turn to fight for our futures and for those who come after us. Because we are the generation of the Green New Deal.
So, welcome to to the Green New Deal Town Hall. So, yeah, so turn to neighbors and then talk about, discuss about why you guys are here and then into this meeting. Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
So, wrap it up. The discussion or conversation.
So did anybody notice any similarities or differences between what people say?
Did you guys have any similarities or differences while you guys were having discussion / conversation? Did you, do you guys inspire? Does it inspire you to move forward? Yes. Woo! So, have you noticed strange weather patterns?
Have you noticed how hot weather lasts longer? Have you noticed more drought or flash floods?
Have you noticed more sharks on the Cape?
Have you noticed that spring and fall are getting shorter? So today, for about 30 to 45 minutes, we'll be quickly discussing the impacts of climate change today and what we are experiencing.
And after that, we're gonna talk about who's the responsibilities, and then fossil fuels, billionaires, and money in politics.
And then we will be discussing what the Green New Deal is and what it means for us as a community and for all the people here. To close out, we will be talking about the Green New Deal and what it takes to put it into action, which is our plan to win the climate. Our plan to win.
So what are the impacts we're seeing right now? So I'm gonna share experience that I had. So living in two countries, it's totally different experience and totally different environment. But I noticed that the fall and spring is getting shorter and shorter. So when I was living in Korea, during spring or fall, I used to like bike with my dad or like have a walk or like look at the flowers and wild animals. We had so much fun, but like now summer and winter is getting longer and longer that like we don't have any like time to spend time during fall and spring, and we don't see a lot of like animals around our environment. And yeah, that's one of the impacts that I had.
So climate change affects all of us, but it affects some more than others. People in low-income communities are facing problems day after day, and we get the privilege of being further away, but it does not mean that we should be able to, or not be conscious of the problem. For example, as I said before, I'm from Bermuda, and recently there was a hurricane that hit, and I mean, I know a few people that lost a roof, but it wasn't devastating because luckily we have because being a British overseas territory, the British like hooked us up, you know? Whereas in the Bahamas during Hurricane Dorian, people lost everything. Their homes, their jobs, their houses, family members, pets. There's a friend at our school who's from the Bahamas, and he was telling me about what had happened to him, and it was just really sad to like see that even though we're both getting hit by the same problems, how people with more money are getting to like hide the effects because they can just like rebuild or like restart from new. But if you don't have the finances to do that, then you're kind of screwed.
So, this is like a popcorn style. How has climate change touched you? Like, anyone can answer, like, without
Scream it out.
yeah, just say
How is climate change?
Katrina,
it. Yeah?
Anyone else?
it takes a lot of my time.
Don't be shy, just say it. Just
Afraid for my grandson's future.
Okay.
Have to elevate a house on the ocean.
Hurricane Sandy. Invasive species.
Lost power.
Lost of birds.
A lot of actions too.
Okay. That's a great answer. I think all the answers that you guys said is all true, and correct.
So we're going to be switching over to Chloe and Hannah.
Hi, my name is Hannah Witherby. I'm 16 and I'm a junior at Natick High School, and I work with Sunrise and Metro West.
Hi, my name is Chloe Carr. I'm 19 years old. I graduated from Natick High School in 2018, but I'm currently taking a gap year. And I'm here today because I want to remind you guys that the young people care about climate change, especially because it affects us, immensely with our futures. And I'm here because I want all my fellow young people and the generations after me to have a future. So, yeah.
All right. So we just talked about the impacts of climate change. What we need to do to stop it is also very important. It's going to take massive government action to transform our energy, food, and transport systems. We need city, state, and federal government officials to team up and pass as many bills as possible at all levels of government. We need them to address this crisis and to move our communities forward, but we're not on track to do any of it.
The problem is that fossil fuel CEOs and corrupt politicians are blocking climate action. They've mounted on decades-long strategy to protect their profits and block progress on climate. Every step of the way. It's going to take a large coalition of people, young and old, to create structural change and within our communities as well as in the government. We know why they are stopping it, and that is why we need to take action.
So here's their strategy. Step 1 is to deceive the people. Step 2 is to buy out politicians. And 3 is to consolidate their power in the government. We're going to go through these one by one to see how fossil fuel billionaires have redefined our common sense and made climate inaction and denialism the status quo.
So first off, you see their first strategy is to deceive the people. So what they want us to do is argue with each other over the causes of climate change and, make sure that we disagree with each other on climate change. And we're going to be looking at companies like ExxonMobil, the biggest private oil company in the world, and how they manipulate our country's politics in their favor. So if we get a little group participation here with the yellow text, so say it with me. 1, 2, 3. They knew!
So internal documents from ExxonMobil in 1978 show that their research only gave us 5 to 10 years before we had to make a change in course. As it says there, man has a time window of 5 to 10 years before the need for hard decisions regarding changes in strategy might become critical.
So again, say it with me on 3. 1, 2, 3. They denied!
As science and public outrage caught up to them, that's not right. Jump forward to 1997. They changed their minds, putting their money and mouths towards denying the threat of climate change itself. The same climate change that their own scientists had warned us about years prior. They funded right-wing think tanks and fossil fuel groups so that effectively sowed lies and doubt. And it says there, CEO Lee Raymond said there's a lot we don't know about how climate change will be in the 21st century and beyond. We need to understand this issue better, and fortunately, we have time. It is highly unlikely that the temperature in the middle of the next century will be significantly affected whether policies are enacted now or 20 years from now.
And say the last one with me. 1, 2, 3. They deflected responsibility.
So as science and public outreach caught up to them, they had to change their tune again. By 2007, they said that climate change was real, but the demand for oil would never stop, and that there was no way for them to stop it. Of course, they did keep funding deniers on the side, as someone said about the same CEO. Raymond is no longer seeking to deny the science behind climate change. Instead, he simply predicts an endless rise in the demand of fossil fuels his company sells, and maintains that there is nothing that can be done to alter them.
So we see that not all they, admitted to knowing that climate change was real, but then they changed their tune and said, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. So, obviously that's wrong.
All right, here's another example. All right, does anybody know who these two are? All right, so these are the Koch brothers, for anybody who doesn't know them. One of them recently passed away, but their company, Koch Industries, makes money from refining oil, coal-fired power plants, pipelines, and similar industries. They have a combined net worth of over $100 billion, which is 100 billion reasons that they should block government climate change. They will lose that money if we act on climate change. That's a fact. We know that. With $100 billion, they have 100 billion reasons and $100 billion worth of money to use to block this action.
Like Exxon, the Koch brothers have spent millions of dollars funding climate change denial. Over $127 million between 1997 and 2017, which is a lot of money. Probably all of our worths in this room combined, plus many, many more. They want us to continue to argue about climate change, and they don't want us to work together to solve the problem. Because if we start holding them accountable, they know that they're going to lose their money and that they're going to be in trouble. They want us to, they don't want us to recognize them as the cause of the problem. That's not all. In 2018, Exxon and Koch Industries were the two companies that spent the most money on oil and gas lobbying, which brings us to their second strategy.
Step 2 is to buy out politicians.
Oh, yes.
The Kochs organize other billionaires and millionaires to spend money in our elections. How much money do you think the Koch network spent in the 2016 elections? Anybody?
Shout out guesses.
Throw it out. They spent $750 million. They didn't spend as much on the presidential race, so the vast majority of their election spending went to congressional and statewide races. The Kochs didn't spend as much as the Democratic or Republican parties, but they're in the same league. And lots of people think that they'll spend more than both parties in future elections. They are basically operating as a third party in the American government system, which is unprecedented in American politics.
And this is just a reminder that this is not a party issue, this is not a Democratic or Republican issue, but this is an issue of power and greed within our government. The result of all this spending is that one, any Republican who takes a moderate stance on climate change gets hit with attack ads and a challenger in the upcoming primary, and two, Democrats are taking money from the fossil fuel companies as well. This isn't just a party issue. There are corrupt politicians within our government, regardless of party, because when money comes into play, politicians can very easily get swayed in what they want to believe in and vote on, and I feel like we need to remember that. And the Koch, yes, there's plenty of dirty money to go around, and they've been building up their network for decades. Their spending is at an all-time high, and it's finally paying off. So now we have two prongs of the three-part strategy. They deceived the public, and they bought up politicians, which now leads us to their third strategy, which is consolidating the power within the government. So now that they donated the money to, I shouldn't say donated, they bought out the politicians with this money, they are now making sure that these politicians vote in their favor, getting green bills off the table, and essentially, keeping them quiet in terms of climate change and making sure that they don't act on it. So now that we understand the fossil fuel billionaire three-pronged strategy, but when it comes to blocking climate action, we're not just talking about the fossil fuel CEOs, and we're not just talking about the politicians, but we're also talking about the billionaire class as a whole. They're wrecking the economy and the environment in all different kinds of ways. The big banks are funneling more and more money into dirty energy, hundreds of billions last year.
So together, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon have signed deals worth billions to provide big oil with data management services. They're helping fossil fuel producers get more oil out of the ground. In fact, the same giant corporations are trying to extract whatever they can from us: labor, debt, data, even our time and attention. Supposedly green billionaires are no exception. Tesla's Elon Musk is notorious for union busting and mercilessly overworking employees in dangerous conditions. So there's no such thing as a billionaire who is good interests.
Because they will always put their money over other people, because they're billionaires, and they're so disconnected.
They don't care about people.
Right. They're so disconnected from society that they don't care about us, because they don't even think about us. They think about their money. So this is a graph that shows what's called Google's revolving door. So this is essentially a graph that shows people going from jobs in Google to jobs in government and vice versa. So we see here that the rate of this in both graphs is increasing. So essentially what that means is that people who work for Google are moving into the government, which basically means that they're corrupt. They're not, the people who are supposed to be working for us in the government aren't working for us. They're looking for the interests in Google and vice versa, and they have connections with each other. And this isn't right. That's not, a true democracy. Companies should be involved in our government. It should be built for the people, by the people, but clearly it's not, and that's wrong.
All right, so this graph shows how a few of our past presidents, how many of their employees have previously worked as lobbyists. Since Ford, on average, there's obviously a huge increase. This, again, is not a partisan issue, it's both parties. So the amount of fossil fuel industry workers that go to work on government jobs is increasing. These jobs are supporting big oil policies, which is another example of the government not representing the people.
Which is the most un-American thing.
All right, so internationally, governments are providing nearly $1 trillion annually in fossil fuel subsidies. The United States alone is providing subsidies on the order of $10 to $52 billion annually. And that's not including costs related to the climate, local health, and environmental impacts. dollar for dollar, we know that renewable energy employs far more people than oil, coal, and gas. Can you imagine if all of that money went towards helping our communities make the transition? Why are we using our tax money to go towards renewable energy?
By Green New Deal, it will change the economy and everyone will have secure, fair, and meaningful work.
The policy is still being worked out, but it's so apparent that we are all together as a community, a part in a joint congressional resolution, as shown up here with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and with Senator Ed Markey, which was just introduced at the beginning of this year in Congress. You can see, just as Kyle said before, I'm going to reiterate, a bunch of kids in the black shirts. This shows the youth initiative really pushing the politicians in power for change, and it's working. And she would not be standing up there if it wasn't for all the black shirts surrounding her. So what is the Green New Deal? The initiative for the Green New Deal is to engage every American and community in the society in an emergency effort for 100% renewable and clean energy. We are working for good jobs for all and guaranteeing a family-sustaining jobs to build the economy. And it's really, really important to leave nobody behind. A lot of disproportionate communities don't have the resources to be involved with making a change due to financial ability. And the biggest thing is to leave nobody behind. This may look familiar. This is a victory garden, and this is a prime example of ordinary people sacrificing and supporting each other in an initiative for the country's benefit. The victory gardens that ordinary families partook in accounted for 40% of the country's vegetable supply in 1943. As a society, we take on the crisis all together, and we can pull off the unimaginable. And climate change happening now can definitely parallel to the Great Depression or World War II, and has even greater effects and pressures on our future. And in order to take action, we will go through the federal government, and as I said before, the parallel, it's risking lives and threatening our future and threatening our existence.
So, currently there are 200 town halls across the country taking place, all discussing the Green New Deal. Young people are gathering around the country to be discussing the Green New Deal and how we want people to listen to our voices and help us make this an action. This movement is big enough to take on their agenda, and the Green New Deal talks about changing racism, exploitation of people, and help just keep the planet alive for everyone who lives on it, not just a small amount of people.
So by a Green New Deal, there will be there will be good jobs for all, and a democratic economy, and a good life for all. So we know that real climate action will create millions of jobs. We'll need wild farms, solar installation, or smart grids, and more on. And in order to make it, we need people, and then people needs job, and then the jobs gonna make everyone involved. So Green New Deal is going to make more jobs that people are gonna be participate, and then
So, one of the goals is to grow healthy and sustainable food in all communities, and to plant billions of trees in order to take all the carbon out of the atmosphere and put it back into the ground. But the Green New Deal resolution is only scratching the surface. A lot of this is physical change, but it's more important to take care of each other.
So some of the lowest carbon footprint jobs are teaching, nursing, child and elder care, domestic and regenerative agricultural work. So these jobs have been given to women of color and migrants who are often exploited and underpaid in today's economy. The Green New Deal talks about how we would try to make the fair jobs for everybody, every person in America, not just a small amount of people. And then one thing to highlight is that wind and solar jobs, they're actually ununionized. So they, assuming everyone knows what a union is, but and so, but fossil fuels industries are unionized, and so they somehow appear to be better because they can get higher wages, but overall it is much worse for the planet and for the people that are doing those jobs, because even if they're supposedly better, they're not better.
So, as I said, Green New Deal will give new jobs and social justice. That's why a core component of Green New Deal is called job guarantee. This policy will be life-changing and can lift up worse economy. People of color, gender, there's no restriction for people of color, gender, indigenous community, low-income worker, disabilities, and so more. Everyone can be involved, still getting benefits of working in the job. With these job guarantee policy, everyone can participate into this transition and still getting beneficial by working together.
So we've talked a lot about how the government needs to lead when it comes to the Green New Deal, but does this mean that the Green New Deal is about to change everything from the top down? No. This transition will be a public undertaking, never since the word big and small. It certainly doesn't mean that elected officials and bureaucrats will do everything for us. We're going to have to put the economy under democratic control. That's the second way the Green New Deal will reshape this country. Only the federal government can set the framework and marshal the resources for change on this scale, and at the speed required. But even if we elect an ideal president in Congress, they won't have it all figured out. Ultimately, the best judge of whether our communities have what they need to thrive is, well, us. Getting the Green New Deal right will take the commitment and creativity of everyone.
So, how many people have heard of energy democracy? Anybody show of hands? A few people? All right. So energy democracy is basically when the people of the community come together and they're trying to find ways in their own community to make more renewable systems and make your community more friendly to the planet. So for example, Natick is leading in subsidizing solar energy. Natick and a bunch of towns around here could be examples of energy democracy. Small communities doing things by themselves, starting out little and then working out to the top. Who made it? We don't have to wait for the people to power. We can do it ourselves.
There's economic democracy, and then there's plain old democracy. The public, and especially marginalized communities, need a meaningful say how the Green New Deal gets designed and implemented, and the ability to intervene when it goes astray. But those are the communities affected most by climate change, and we need to make sure their voices are not only heard, but their needs are met. Because there are still communities without clean water or breathable air, and we need to address that and make sure that they are included in the Green New Deal and that their communities are made green and safe, because we in Natick live, we're privileged. We don't have to worry about clean water. We don't have to worry about breathable air, but there are communities out there, specifically communities of color, poor communities, low-income communities that don't have those things, so we need to make sure that they're included as well, because while a community garden will help them, we also need to address that they can't drink their water without boiling it, or they have to buy bottled water. This is a quote that's, "A Green New Deal must be developed through transparent and inclusive consultation, collaboration, and partnership with frontline and vulnerable communities, labor unions, worker cooperatives, civil society groups, and academia and businesses."
All right, so you can raise your hand. What do you take from that quote? Anybody?
What does that quote mean to you? What do you think it means?
You guys,
Anyone? You can shout it out.
Any thoughts?
We need everyone.
Right.
And in the open.
No billionaire consultations.
Right. Which means it's built by the communities for the communities. So we as Americans deserve a better future than the one predicted for us now. Especially as a young person, I'm afraid for what's to come in the future. I know kids my age, younger, that are wondering if they can even have kids when they're older, because will their kids live a livable future? Will they have a livable future? It's something that us as young people are really afraid of, but the Green New Deal, when I first read it, it gave me hope, because it's a concrete plan and concrete action that not only involves the government and the government doing things, but it's also communities, communities saying what they need to thrive, and it's not just the government talking to us, it's us using our voices, and I think that's really amazing, and it's something that stuck out to me, and it gives me hope for a future, and I hope it gives you hope as well. And those are the democratic values of the Green New Deal. This vision says a lot more about values, about the life we think each and every one of us deserves to lead. And here's our third and final theme, which is good life for all. As we've seen, the fossil fuel economy squeezes everything from its working people and the planet, all to maximize profits and power and keep them concentrated in the hands of the 1%. But what the Green New Deal does is it puts the future in our hands and gives us the power, because we have the power to make that change, and it gives it to us.
So the Green New Deal. So the Green New Deal builds a society based on radically different values, like cooperation instead of competition, which is a huge thing in America. Rather than feeding endless consumption, keeping us isolated, plugged in, and stressed out, and numb to the violence around us, the Green New Deal prizes community and solidarity. Instead of pitting us against each other for the benefit of the few, it lifts up the many, prioritizing all of our needs and dreams. In this vision of society, things like healthcare, education, affordable housing, and meaningful work are treated as universal rights, which they should be. We shouldn't just live to go do the same thing every day, not have the same rights, not have the same access to healthcare as other people just because you were born into a poor family.
And just because what your paycheck is.
Yeah.
Everyone deserves those things. Right, everybody deserves those things. So imagine the United States where renowned architects clamor to design new public housing, complete with green spaces and daycare centers, where on a given evening of the week you look forward to stopping into your local library or food co-op, not only for private nourishment, but to feel more connected to your community and to democracy. You know, again, this is about bringing communities together instead of isolating them, which is what is currently, happening in our society. And, imagine a Metro West that exemplifies a true democracy and has a government that represents our needs and our futures. We can make this vision a reality in all three of the areas we've explored, guaranteeing good jobs, economic democracy, and a better life for all. We can take courage from the very real historical precedents of the 30s and 40s. We've done so much of this before and not very long ago, but the Green New Deal will be even better.
As we've seen in this presentation, the climate crisis has not affected everyone equally. This time, we decide to leave nobody behind. If you're a woman, if you're a person of color, if you are disabled, it does not matter. You deserve the right to the same health care, to the same housing, to the same jobs. It doesn't matter who you are if we don't do anything. Because this planet is going down if we don't stop. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire in 10 years if we don't change anything, because the planet isn't gonna. The planet doesn't care how much money you have when it comes down to it. It doesn't care where you were born. It doesn't care about any of it. Like, we just need to provide for it.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
We can refuse to let those in power divide us, which is exactly what they're doing. They're isolating us. They're keeping us apart from our communities. They're not letting us find solutions with each other. They're not letting us elect people who we want to be elected. We can work together to actively adapt to the damages done, or work to prevent more from happening. The 1930s saw a wave of mass labor organizing and strikes across the country. People power, was a major force behind the victories of the New Deal. It all depends on the action of the people. Today, the stakes are even higher. Not only is our planet in dire need of our help, but the forces working to stop us are stronger and more entrenched than ever. This is where community involvement becomes key.
So let's recap everything that we've talked about. Climate change is happening right now, and it will affect all of us, and it's getting worse every day. And a wealthy handful of fossil fuel CEOs and corrupt politicians are blocking progress on the climate, but there is finally a solution on the table that rises to the scale of the crisis, and it's a Green New Deal.
Thank you. Let's give another round of applause to youth leadership. And at this time, we are going to set up a row of chairs, and we're going to invite our panelists to come on up. And if questions have emerged, I want to draw your attention to the runners. The runners have index cards. They are ready to receive your questions. They're going to kind of create a question deck. And then when we get to the Q&A in a little while, we'll be giving our panelists a chance to respond to some of these questions. Good evening, everyone. We're moving into our panelist time and our Q&A. My name is Ian. I'm going to be moderating, perhaps with Kyle moderating a bit as well. And I am the founder and director of the Common Street Spiritual Center here. My pleasure to welcome you all and to host this fantastic event. I'm so inspired by the leadership we just heard. Thank you. And I'm grateful that so many people have come out tonight, because this is about people power, and this is about building a movement. So I'm glad that you're here, and I hope that tonight brings us together for action. So we have a really fantastic panel, and we've asked each panelist to by way of introduction, to speak for just 2 minutes, very briefly, could even be under 2, about what the Green New Deal means for their work, especially as it relates to the environmental crisis. So I think I'll just work my way down the line here, and I'll give the very briefest of introductions to each of our panelists. First, an introduction, then we'll hear our 2 minutes from the first panelist, and then an intro and the next. And then once the panel has been introduced, we'll turn it over to Q&A. So standing right here to my right, sitting right here to my right, we have Senator Becca Rausch. She was elected to the Massachusetts Senate in 2018, and she represents many of us here in this room. And she is the chairperson for the Joint Committee on Municipalities, vice chair for the Joint Committee on Elder Affairs, and a member of the Joint Committees on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities, Public Health, Public Service, State Administration and Regulatory Oversight, and Veterans and Federal Affairs. I'll just say, I won't read the entire bio, but I'll say I heard Senator Rausch speak at the climate strike in Wellesley just a few weeks ago. She spoke in a very inspiring way, and I know that she's a strong advocate for the Green New Deal. So let's welcome her again and hear what she has to say.
Thank you so much for having me for that warm introduction. It's an honor and a privilege to represent so many of us here in the Senate. I want to talk the Green New Deal. You probably missed the first part, so sorry. Maybe I'll read the slides after. But the Green New Deal is obviously a federal plan and a federal policy proposal. So I am focusing on what we can do right here in Massachusetts right now, because I'm not going to wait for them to figure out what's going on in DC. And so there's a lot of stuff going on at the State House. To go into those details in depth would be more than my allotted, what's like 45 seconds left. So what I am going to tell you is that there's sort of conversations ongoing about resiliency, adaptation, and mitigation, all kind of happening sort of simultaneously. The House already passed an adaptation bill. From my perspective, it's called the GreenWorks bill that came out from the House July, I think. The Senate is working on a mitigation package, including, I'm very proud to say, the components of a bill that I filed with Representative Maria Robinson from Framingham. The Senate bill came out successfully, brand new bill filed by 2 brand new legislators, came out of committee successfully in our first 6 months in office. And that bill is about creating large building energy standards. So standards for energy consumption and energy reduction for existing large building structures. And that's just honestly one of several mitigation components that the Senate is thinking about right now.
Thank you, Senator Rausch. It's good to have allies in the government. So we're glad you're here. Now I'd like to introduce our next panelist, Craig Altimos, who I've had the pleasure to work with over the years in environmental justice. He is the founding executive director of the Better Future Project, which is the umbrella organization of 350 Massachusetts, Divested, and communities responding to extreme weather. And Craig recently was appointed to a task force to advise the state of Massachusetts on implementing its climate goals, and a task force to recommend a climate action plan for Harvard University. So Craig is a veteran of climate activism and organizing, especially in Massachusetts. We're really grateful that you're here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you again for that kind introduction. Thank you all for coming out here tonight. I know there are many other places folks could be. Want to give a shout out to our 350 Mass volunteers and the Metro West Node in particular, and our renewable Natick affiliate that are here in the House. They're a big part of building the local climate movement here. If you're not involved in 350 Mass, please consider joining or the renewable Natick, which is right here in Natick, which is awesome. I think that our youth leaders did a really great job of laying out what a Green New Deal means for us, but to very briefly add on, I think it represents our last best chance at avoiding climate catastrophe. To me, the key components of a Green New Deal are urgency and speed, and we need to basically decarbonize our entire economy within the next decade or so. And then we need to really make sure that as we do that work, we are really centering equity and justice, and that we are correcting the centuries of sins that our society and other societies have been perpetuating on each other, particularly people of color and low-income folks, but really across the board. This is our opportunity to really take this crisis and to use it as an opportunity to reshape how we want society to function and how we want to interact with each other. I think there are two paths that we have on the road ahead of kind of retrenchment and putting up walls and borders to try to protect each other from the evil outsiders, or to really celebrate each other's common humanity and unite for better purpose. And I think that's what the Green New Deal is all about. So we're excited to promote it.
Thank you, Greg. Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Jillian Wilson-Martin, who is Natick's Sustainability Coordinator. It's a position, a growing number of towns and cities are adding onto the force. In Natick, Jillian works on a range of issues from energy efficiency and renewable energy generation to climate resiliency and low-impact development. And I want to give a special thanks on behalf of Renewable Natick, our local activist group, because without Jillian's guidance and kind of support, we would never have been able to do everything we've done to move Natick towards a net zero future. And Jillian is now developing Natick's net zero action plan as well. So she's doing some very exciting work, and we're really delighted to have her here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you to Renewable Natick for all you're doing, because how I see the Green New Deal and what our youth leaders presented is it's really about community. And right now, most of the action, though we do have great leadership in the state, is happening at the local level. And there's over 100 cities and towns around the country that have committed to going to 100% renewable energy. And Natick is one of a growing number of them. Our Net Zero Action Plan promises to get Natick to eliminate our greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, but that isn't fast enough. And how I see the Green New Deal is more conversations, more meetings with people like you. Me not being the only employee in government who has this as their top priority. I don't want to see myself alone at the DPW in 10 years working on this. And so we need you to make sure that climate change is a priority for Natick and for our community, and to make sure that we have federal support for a Green New Deal, because climate change doesn't care about the political boundaries that we draw for our cities and towns, but it impacts all of us. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to your questions.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Alyssa Landry, who is the director for the Massachusetts Audubon's Broadmoor Wildlife Sanctuary in Natick and Sherburne, which is one of 20 staff sanctuaries statewide. She is trained as a biologist with degrees from Brandeis University and UMass Boston. At Broadmoor, she directs staff and projects ranging from ecological management of the 800-acre sanctuary to providing natural science education in schools through a naturalist in residence program. Her office is in a renovated horse barn that has won state and national awards for energy efficiency and produces more electricity than it uses. And I know that Alyssa has also been a key force in raising awareness about climate change in various ways at Broadmoor. So it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm completely inspired by the youth leaders here and by the audience. How many of you know Broadmoor?
your local wildlife sanctuary. I know some students from Walnut Hill were there this week. Were you there? Yes. Okay. They volunteered to help us do some work on our new trail system, which is being designed to be resilient in the face of climate change. More about that later. Climate change is affecting Broadmoor in many ways, as it is the entire planet. A lot of it has to do with wetlands and forests. The most exciting part of my job currently is something that happened last week, which is Mass Audubon's Climate Action Plan, which is a statewide plan that was endorsed by our board of directors to work in the communities that Mass Audubon is located in and beyond, and provide education, advocacy, and conservation science. What does that mean for Natick? It means that when we hire a conservation ecologist, which will be posted November 1st, so if anybody's in that field, it's going to be a great job. It'll be statewide, but it will inform the work we do at Broadmoor, so we can work with the communities and other organizations and agencies on issues like adaptation. How do we manage our land to preserve nature in the face of climate change? We're also hiring a statewide education coordinator for climate action and several other positions. So the exciting part is we'll have experts that we can then bring to bear locally and support the efforts here. We are 100% behind the Green New Deal at the federal, the state, and local levels. We supported the youth climate strike. We were all on strike in Boston. And we are with you, and there is hope, and we hope we can help the youth of the future in combating climate change and making our planet a livable place again. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce our final panelist, Casey Townsend, who is the Executive Director at the Natick Community Organic Farm, and I believe new to the position relatively. Is it? A year. Welcome. For those of you who don't know, the Natick Community Organic Farm is a certified organic farm providing productive open space, farm products, and hands-on education for all ages year-round. In any given day, Casey can find himself chasing loose pigs, teaching high schoolers about tomato production, and carrying heavy buckets of maple sap through the woods. And this fall, Casey is most focused on turning all of the farm's vegetable production spaces into permanent no-till beds, which pretty impressive goal. And it definitely relates back to our presentation where we heard about sustainable farming, permaculture, agriculture, and how that factors into the Green New Deal. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say too.
Thank you. Agriculture is in a really interesting place relative to the Green New Deal because do you know which industry contributes most to climate change? Yeah, agriculture, strangely. So we, not necessarily us here in Natick, but agriculture in general contributes most of the carbon to the atmosphere through just general tillage, right? Conventional tillage releases tons and tons of carbon into the atmosphere. Agriculture also sends food all over the world. Last week, my wife went to Trader Joe's and brought home blueberries from Chile, and I was like, what? Chile? Why are we getting food from that far away, right? So our current food system is just based so heavily on fossil fuels and carbon. The great thing about agriculture, it also presents the solution at the same exact time. Farms like ours, which is in South Natick, is just it's a patchwork of all these local farms that exist here where you can access lots of vegetables where they don't move hundreds of miles, which is really amazing. We're also employing lots of youth in what we do. And I have a great problem in that, where I grew up in Pennsylvania, it was hard to get kids onto the farm to do work. I have to turn kids away from farm work, which is a really hard thing to do. And the type of farming that we're doing at Natick Community Farm is a form of regenerative agriculture, which is no-till. So no-till is essentially we're taking carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it into the ground, right? So we're creating a carbon sink, which is something really revolutionary. It's funny that everybody's mentioning like high tech. We're actually going low tech, old technology, which is kind kind of a whole turn of sorts, right? We're bringing back things that are based in Asian culture from, One Straw Revolution, if you're familiar with that book. We're bringing back all these old technologies that have actually worked, and now we're giving them a nice little innovative spin. So.
And now we're going to bring some questions to the panel. And it's my job to kind of think about which one to ask here. We might not get to all of the questions submitted, but I want to encourage you, if your question doesn't come up, we're going to have more meetings. You can join Sunrise Metro West, you can join Renewable Natick, you can join 350 Massachusetts, and you could ask these questions again. We'll get them answered. First question, how can we ensure a just transition to the era of the Green New Deal? I'll give our panelists a moment to think about it. And the way we'll run this is, you don't all have to answer each one. I'm going to try as the moderator to make sure each person's kind of getting some play here. And, feel free, if you think you have an answer, just raise your hand and look at each other and pass the mic along. How can we ensure a just transition to the era of the Green New Deal? Craig's raising his hand.
I think that there's not an easy answer to that, I would say, unfortunately, but it really relies on all of us committing ourselves to make sure that we can center equity and justice as we do this work, and not just have it be about Tesla. I forget, the student said, Tesla building cars in non-unionized factories that are exploiting their workers and continuing to perpetuate the same problems that we've been having in our society, but instead really committing ourselves that we take this opportunity to advance equity, to advance justice, and to correct for the centuries of oppression that we've put upon people of color in this country, of indigenous people, on immigrants, on religious minorities, and so on and so forth, and really, again, center their voices in the solutions. I think that's a really critical part of the Green New Deal. And we're actually, 350 Mass is actually convening a Massachusetts Green New Deal table to talk about what that looks like at the state level for Massachusetts, and we've very intentionally been not just inviting all of the climate groups to come to a table and talk about this, but instead really inviting environmental justice groups that represent communities of color and labor unions to really set the priorities for what should our policies look like for a Green New Deal, to make sure that their voices are the leading parts of that table, so that we, again, really make sure that the right voices are there.
I want to lift up just the last part of what you were just saying, which is that elections matter. I say this a lot, so many of you have heard me say this before, but elections matter. And if you want to ensure as best you can that we usher in an era of the Green New Deal in a just and fair way, then we need to elect people who care not only about the environment, but also and combating climate change and protecting what we have and doing all the things that have been the subject of conversation this evening, but also rolling that out in a way that is just and equitable and fair and focuses on environmental justice and will not leave the justice component on the cutting room floor / the compromise floor, which is what legislating looks like. And I want to tell you that is particularly important in state legislatures, because district lines we're coming up in the 2020 census, district lines are drawn by state legislatures, right? So my colleagues in the state house, not me, I'm not involved in that process, but other people who are elected to the state legislature are going to draw not only our state reps and Senate lines, but also our congressional districts. And that's true all across the country. So, elections matter.
So that felt like, I think we got a satisfying answer. Thank you. So I'd like to read this question. This may be part of a rhetorical question, but I think it's a great question, so I'm going to read it aloud. First starts out, great presentation. It's always good. The presenters touched on international situations. Can we agree that just as low-income communities and communities of color in the U.S. are disproportionately affected by climate change, the global south is disproportionately affected as well. Can we agree? We can agree. Can we agree that the industrialized nations have responsibility toward the poorer nations? And that it is not just about us? Does anybody want to comment on that? Or do we just all agree? Or?
I'm happy to comment, but I also just talk, so thanks.
So from a natural systems viewpoint, a lot of the countries in the tropics and the southern portions of North American and European countries are disproportionately affected by climate change, and really need the support of industrialized economies to be able to have the very basic clean water, clean air, food, the things that we take for granted. So I have done a lot of work in other countries, and I see the inequity of the North American and the southern industrialized countries compared to the tropical countries where the biggest biodiversity is found. So biodiversity in places like Brazil affect our planet up here, affect our climate, affect the carbon dioxide sequestration, oxygen availability. So we're all in it together. It's one planet, especially from a natural viewpoint. So that's a little off focus for the question, but it's all one world.
Thank you. One question, another question that's come up. How can we be sure that there is enough renewable energy to replace fossil fuel energy during the switchover? For example, to avoid having the lights go off. Anyone want to field that? Jillian.
I don't think there's going to be a problem of getting enough renewable energy to support the transition. And I think that I would start by opting up, which is something that you have as an option here in Natick, in part because of Renewable Natick, the local organization here, which focuses on the choice that you have as an electricity customer in Massachusetts to choose where your energy comes from. So you can choose to get your energy right now from 100% renewable sources. And if you're smart about it, you can choose to make sure that those sources are adding what we call additionality to the renewable energy market. So you're investing in new energy systems, new renewable systems that will support that transition and will help create a market that leads to a Green New Deal with better jobs, a better life for all, and the other components.
I'd like to put out a question that asks the panelists to use their imagination. This is my question. I get one question, right? Maybe two. So imagine that the Green New Deal has been passed. Federal level, state level, regional level, on some level it's been passed. And now imagine that, the funds are being directed and so forth, just as we've seen in the presentation. In your line of work, what do you see happening? After the Green New Deal is passed, how's that changing your work? What kind of money are you getting? What kind of programs are you starting up? What kind of actions are you going to take once the Green New Deal is passed?
So I think about this question a lot because when the USDA calls me up in the springtime, they say, how many acres of soybeans are you growing? And I go, we don't grow acres of soybeans, right? And so that just shows you where the USDA's brain is at, where they're thinking like large-scale commodities, right? So I think part of the process with the passing of the Green New Deal is how can the government support smaller-scale farmers, mid to small-level scale farmers, right? Because there's a really great study that came out a couple years ago from Brian Downey, who's one of the Brandeis professors. He's done a lot of amazing work here in the Metro West. And he did this research to figure out that New England by itself can grow or raise about 54% of its food, which is kind of amazing, but that takes a push from the government as well, right? So there needs to be that kind of push and support. I also would like to see, as I understand it, Natick is one of a very special places where they have a town-run farm, right? There's only 1 of 3, as I understand it, towns in America that have town-run farms. That's a pretty special thing to have here in Natick, and I would like to see that in every single community to have a town-owned farm.
So in my line of work, I would like to see a naturalist in residence in every public school, working with every grade, every student and every teacher to develop a really deep understanding of our environment and the relationship of humans to our environment.
I would like to see myself at less night meetings, and and I think that would happen with the Green New Deal because I don't think I would need to be inserting myself in as many meetings as I possibly could. But more than that, I would see traffic on our sidewalks. I would see a different looking Natick Center that prioritizes denser development where we have public transit. I would see solar panels in every building, and I would see a change in how our building regulations work, and I would see every new building that the town is building to be of the highest standard that can be a model for the private sector. So I think it would be incredible, and I would be excited to live in the community that has a Green New Deal.
Yeah, so I think for those of us in the advocacy space, it would be a game changer. I think we could all spend fewer evenings at events like this, and that would be wonderful. We do love you all. But I mean, I think realistically, actually, I think groups like 350 Mass would probably need to move into more of a watchdog role to make sure that we are implementing the Green New Deal according to both the speed that the climate crisis demands, and again, making sure that we are hitting the equity goals as part of that, and that we're making sure that the benefits are being distributed in an equitable manner. One of the other hats that Ian mentioned that is a sister program of Better Future Project is called Communities Responding to Extreme Weather, or CREW, which works to build grassroots climate resilience, and we just have a tentative new goal that we are setting that by 2025, we want to make sure that every single Massachusetts resident is within 20 minutes of a climate resilience hub, which is a resource to educate folks around how they can be prepared for climate impacts, what climate impacts to expect, and also potentially provide shelter capacity, cooling shelters, warming shelters, backup energy supplies, that kind of stuff to help people weather the coming heat waves and storms and floods that we are increasingly going to be seeing in our Commonwealth and around the country. And so I think for CREW is a very new, very underfunded program, and I would think that would be the type of work that the state government would really step in to support proactively, and even have volunteer, or rather paid members of the community who during a heat wave would go door to door and do welfare checks on their neighbors to make sure that folks without air conditioning have the support they need to stay cool and can get to a cooling shelter or get to the hospital if they need to do that. So I think that kind of community-centered resource.
I almost hate to give this answer, but you don't have to wait for the Green New Deal to happen to make pretty much everything that you all just said happen now. Because we live in a state where we're lucky that we have, at least myself and several other lawmakers who actually, at the state level, who actually really do care about this and also don't have all the ideas because we're not the ones working on the ground. Also, sadly, it won't mean fewer night meetings for me. We'll just have night meetings on other things. But, I mean, certainly the enforcement piece, but, send me your ideas. I'm not hard to find. And let's see if we can make them happen now. Because, one of 3 community-operated farms in the country, but we should have more of those. That sounds great, right? Environmental resource in every school, that sounds great. All this CREW, all these things sound great. So call me, and let's see if we can make it happen.
And Kyle, you got something to say?
That's all. And you know, I think one thing that I think about the Green New Deal is that it doesn't have to be just like a legislation, a piece of paper, or something that we have to sign or go through the legislative process to happen. The Green New Deal, symbolically to me, can be a North Star that points us in the direction that we want to go. 100% renewable energy requires a lot of mechanisms to it, but if we as a community decide that's our position and where we want to go, then that's what the Green New Deal means for us. Right? If you want our jobs to reflect that new economy, that's what the Green New Deal means for us. If we want to include all the communities in the political process and make sure that democracy works for us, then that's what the Green New Deal should mean for you. So I think, you know, instead of also just thinking about it as a legislative priority, think of it as the flag that we march to when we want to see a new renewable future. That's the way I look at it.
A little comic relief. So, that was a very imaginative question. How about now a very wonky question? You all ready for this? Very technical, very kind of complicated. Can any of the panelists explain the role that banks play in contributing to the fossil fuel industry? So it's something not everyone might know from the top of their head. How do banks contribute? What role do they play?
That's for me, that's fine, I'll take it. Well, one of the ways, I think, I certainly don't have a complete answer to this question, but one of the ways that banks contribute to the fossil fuel industry is by investing in them, right? And this is something that is pending actually as a piece of legislation at the State House to get our state retirement funds divested from fossil fuels. I'm proud to co-sponsor that one, and you know, there are a couple of divestiture policy proposals that we're currently working on, but that's part of it, right? So especially if you bank at a local bank, you might go to them and say, right, they don't just hold all of that money in a vault in the bottom anymore, right? They invest it somewhere else, and they make money by using the money that you save in the bank to go make some more money, right? Which is how they can make profits and issue loans and things like that. So if you bank at a local bank, you might go in and ask, where are you investing the funds? And find out. And then if you don't like the answer, ask them to change it. Now they're not going to change it just for you, but you get 50 people or 100 people all have accounts at the bank, especially if it's a local one, and say, or even a regional one, and say, we don't want you investing our dollars in fossil fuels. And you can change it, or we're all going to take our business somewhere else. So, ask, right? This is part of grassroots, is asking the questions and finding out the answers. Sorry? There you go.
Craig, anything else?
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Sabina Von There, one of our volunteer leaders who's been helping to lead a campaign against Chase Bank, which a recent report showed was the biggest funder of fossil fuels in terms of our banking system. And so there's been an ongoing campaign as Chase has been trying to expand in Boston to have a presence at all their store openings, branch openings to call it Chase. But yeah, I mean, basically, if you bank with a big national bank, Chase, Bank of America, they are all investing in fossil fuels right now. And so if you don't want your money going toward that, you should go toward a local credit union or a local bank that is more likely to be aligned with your values.
Thank you. Oh, sure.
So I know it's cool to hate banks in here, but I did want to say one other thing, which is that even banks know that the climate crisis is happening, and while they have been investing in fossil fuels, they are thinking strategically about where their future investments will be, and they're considering climate change, and they're considering the impacts of climate change in their investments. So it kind of speaks back to what our youth leaders were telling us about ExxonMobil and the energy companies, which is that they've seen the crisis, they've denied it, and now they're making investments in ways that they think will be most profitable to them. And it's not only in continuing to invest in the status quo. So I think it's important to remember that the tune is changing not just in terms of, yes, we need to ask banks to divest in fossil fuels, but we also need to be mindful of what we want them to invest in and what impacts we want them to think about.
Certainly, for example, if you want to put solar panels on your home, you can go to a bank, take out a loan. Then they're investing in solar. Right there. I'd like to, since this is a Sunrise Movement event, I don't know if any of the questions I have here are from youth or young people, maybe, but maybe not. So I'd like to just take a live question from a young person who has a question for the panelists.
I believe the question was, how can we center the voices of disproportionately impacted populations, and particularly communities of color, immigrant communities, Native American communities, et cetera? Have I said that, summarized that well? Okay.
Well, maybe you have a good answer. I don't know, we're all white up here, you know, and we're all privileged, we're all living in Massachusetts. I don't have the answer for that, and it's something that I struggle with here in Natick because we are a privileged community, and it's something that we're working on with our net zero plan. So one of our goals is to have our plan to be equitable and just, and one of our coming actions is to have focus groups with stakeholders that include people I don't usually see at these meetings, people that I'm not usually interacting with, including our low-income and more vulnerable populations. But when it comes to international leaders, I think for me as a citizen, it's about sharing those other voices and not only sharing, you know, Greta's story, but there's a lot of great, as you mentioned, Indigenous leaders and young people that are not just the classic white girl leading the movement. So I appreciate your question.
So I think sometimes it looks like too big an issue to tackle, but I think tackling it in small ways that make a difference starts to build up change. An example is from Broadmoor, we have a naturalist in residence who goes into 2 housing projects in Framingham once a week year-round for an after-school program with kids who otherwise don't have much fun after school. They come home, their parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, but we bring nature to them. We bring nature to them in their housing projects. We sometimes bring them to Broadmoor for field trips. Long term, we're hoping some of them will love nature enough to want to go further, possibly come to our summer camp, maybe become counselors, and work their way into a system that is very white and privileged, like most of us here. So there are small steps that I think each of us can take in the places we work or study that can begin to add up to making a difference.
And I think one way that we can, so at the farm we think a lot about doing things, like what are actual steps that we can do, and we partner with folks from Natick Regional School. So every Thursday, folks from Keith come to the farm, and they're people who are often forgotten about, but these are folks, like today I was working with 2 people who were first generation from Brazil, who didn't speak very much English, but we incorporated them into what was going on, because those are folks who have the skills, who want to learn how to farm and take care of the land. So I think supporting programs like Keith Tech, and specifically Doug Paul, who's an amazing horticultural teacher there, I think supporting people that know how to do things like that, or are learning how to do things like that, are an important step towards ensuring a strong agricultural system.
A couple of things. Kind of, it's going to sound a little bit like a checklist, but first, make it a priority. Second, meet people where they are. If you look around the room and you're saying, I'm not seeing communities of color represented. I'm not seeing Native American communities represented. I'm not seeing low-income people represented in this space. Go meet them where they are. That's number 2. Number 3, ask questions and ask them genuinely. Every time I have done this, and anytime any of my colleagues that I know of who have done this have gone and asked genuinely, you get a lot of answers. People who are historically disenfranchised, part of that disenfranchisement is stripping of their voice. And when you ask genuinely, particularly as a person with power, and I don't mean as an elected official, I realize that probably sounds silly coming from me, but if you are an activist and you are already working in this space and trying to effectuate change, you have power. And people who have been disenfranchised from the system, and there are lots of communities that have been disenfranchised over several hundred years in this country and all over the world. Part of that result is a feeling, and in many instances, a reality that they don't have access and don't have a voice. So go and ask questions, make space for the answers. Then when you get the answers, do something with them. Don't just let them fall on the floor, right? Say, thank you very much for talking to me, and walk away. Do something with them, right? And don't do it alone, because the story, the answer, and all of the strength behind that answer comes from the authenticity of the speaker. And, you know, as a white person myself, you know, the best thing I can do to lift up communities of color and Native communities and many other kinds of communities that have been disenfranchised is to move over and pass the mic and lift them up as much as I possibly can.
Mic drop.
Planned comic relief. We planned that. So I would just want to say thank you for that question. I think that's a fantastic question, and I do think it invites us to really expand our minds and recognize the diversity of the movement, and especially the global nature of the climate justice movement, where in the US, as activists, we have incredible privilege. Around the world, being an environmental activist is one of the most dangerous things you could do. And especially people of color, people in the global south, are being killed as environmental activists. And that's something to really recognize, and just to say, it is not really a white movement as it may sometimes appear, but it actually isn't. It's a global movement of all people and all humanity, and really all life. So, thank you. Great question. Here's one that's kind of takes us from the political to the cultural and the personal. So, a question here. Yeah. In addition to political change, we will also need cultural change. In other words, every human will need to play their part. What changes in your lifestyle are you personally willing to make? Are you willing to give something up? For example, not flying, not eating meat, etc. It's a good question for all of us to consider, but we're going to put it to the panelists.
Yeah, I mean, I do eat meat, but I call myself a meat minimalist. I try to only eat poultry that's more locally and humanely raised. I don't have a car, don't have air conditioning, haven't turned the heat on yet this year, not planning to do that for hopefully sometime in November. We've made it to December at least one time before we turn on the heat. But at the end of the day, honestly, so yes, we need to do all of that. I do still fly, and that's something I feel guilty about, and I think getting to the point of giving up, but have to work that through the wife first. And through my parents who live in Florida. But I think honestly, I think it's individual change is important. We should all do what we can, but there is actually a very intentional strategy by polluting industries to put the blame on us and to say that it's your fault for driving, it's your fault for throwing away the disposable coffee cup that they put in your hand, right? Like, yes, we should bring our reusable cups, we should bring reusable bags, but like we need system change, we need policy change, so that we are not put in a situation where you order, this happens to me several times, where I order a for here mug at a coffee shop and then they hand me a disposable coffee cup. And it's like, what am I supposed to do? Like if I say I don't want this, they will just throw it away, right? And if and then I'm the guy who's just making a big pain out of it for nothing, right? So like, we need to change these systems and not like bear too much personal guilt, because we did not create the system. We were not the ones who politicized this issue and obstructed and delayed progress for decades. That was the fossil fuel industry, the chemical industries, the automobile industries, and I think we ultimately need to hold them accountable, both financially and criminally at the end of the day, because they have destroyed so much of life on Earth.
And thank you for that. Very inspiring answer. We only have a few more minutes left for the Q&A, and then we're going to have a closing song together. That's part of the Sunrise Movement. We sing, we bring it together, we build community. And we have Kyle, who's an amazing song leader. So here's a question that needs some clarification. There seems to be a bit of confusion over the word mitigation versus adaptation. Can you explain how that word, mitigation, fits into climate change?
So in Natick, we're working on both mitigation and adaptation as it relates to climate change. And mitigation is what we can do to keep the impacts of climate change from being the worst case scenario. So it means it's focused on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. That's what mitigation is. It's about renewable energy sources, it's about sustainable transportation, it's about changes in our agricultural practices. It's about a lot of what the Green New Deal, as I understand it, is really focused on. Adaptation is about how we can be more resilient, how knowing that the climate is changing, what can we do about it to make sure that we have a livable future. And there's programs at the state level, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program that Natick participates in, and a lot of the surrounding communities that I heard were here tonight are also engaged in. And that program helps us understand what our risks are as it relates to climate change, as identified by the community and community members, and prioritizes what we can do about them. So I hope that answers your question.
I'm really glad to hear this answer because I didn't want to go first because I wanted to make sure that my understanding was consistent with what other panelists were going to say. But I'm glad to say that the legislature is also thinking about adaptation and mitigation in the ways that were just described, right? So, for example, one of the components in the GreenWorks adaptation bill that came out of the House is shoring up the seawalls, right? The oceans and the shores are already impacted by climate change, and we need to do things to protect what we already have, right? That are already deteriorating. The mitigation piece is kind of stopping future problems or halting the destruction that we're already doing, right? Like reducing energy consumption in existing large buildings over 15,000 square feet. It's a really good bill, you should all look into. But that's what the legislature's doing.
So I actually want to say something fairly unrelated that I think is important to articulate. I apologize, I'm going to detour. But within mitigation, there's been a lot of talk about the number 2050 and how we need to get to net zero by 2050. And unfortunately, that is based on some inaccurate and incomplete science. And I just want to make sure folks are aware of the reality of the science. So did folks remember that big IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report that came out in 2018? That report said that to have a 50% chance of avoiding a 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in temperature, which scientists said we should avoid at all costs, 1.5 degrees Celsius, have a 50% chance the entire world needs to cut our pollution in half by 2030 and end it by 2050. That's for a coin flip chance. And that coin flip chance does not include a lot of parts of climate science that we know about, like tipping points and feedback loops. And there's a particular, like when coal plants pollute, they emit sulfur dioxide, which reflects sunlight. And so when we stop polluting coal, which we have to do, there's going to be additional warming because we're going to stop reflecting that sunlight. And that's going to be fairly quick. So it's actually a weighted coin toss against us. And so, you know, I know we don't want to be lifting up Greta Thunberg individually because there are a lot of youth of color who are really out there, but she did give a really powerful address to you, and she pointed out that if we want a 2/3 chance of avoiding a 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise, which again, like who would get on a plane if there's only a 2/3 chance of it landing safely? Like those are not really sufficient odds. But if we want to have that insufficient odds and even 2/3 chance, polluting at current levels, we will blow through that carbon budget in 8.5 years for the entire world. We will wipe out that 2/3 chance and be speeding along toward that 50% chance. And again, with the international talk, there's differentiated responsibilities. Countries like the US have been polluting for 150 years, have a responsibility with our wealth and our historic pollution to do more, to go faster, to cut deeper, and to do it in a just way that helps other countries do the same. So it's going to be tough for our legislative friends because it's not easy to get us to net zero by 2030, but that is morally what we need to do, what the Green New Deal is calling for, and what we need to demand from our elected officials.
Yes, and one of my colleagues recently gave me a statistic that I thought was really interesting. And I'm going to miss the numbers a little bit because I don't remember exactly, but it's pretty close. And it actually pertains to one of the earlier questions about what can we each individually do to help. And one of the things that you can do is to drive an electric car, right? And Tesla, right? There are lots of other things that are problematic about electric cars and the car industry, fine. But let's put that aside for a second. If we wanted to convert to an entirely electric vehicle crew, right? If everybody's driving electric, we would have to, by maybe 2050, but I think sooner than that, right? Probably not 8.5 years, so we're even beyond the 8.5 years piece. Individual car owners, right, those of us who drive cars that run on gas, would need to purchase electric vehicles at a rate of some 70,000 per year, right? That's 70,000 people in Massachusetts alone, just Massachusetts. 70,000 people who drive gas-powered automobiles shift to electric every single year for the next decade. We don't even have that supply. We have less than half that supply right now. So even if there were 70,000 plus people who actually wanted to do that and make that happen and invest their dollars in doing that, right? Electric vehicles are more expensive, etc. We don't even have the cars to do it. So yes, and certainly the legislature, certainly the state legislature can't do this alone. So I'm very glad that you're all here because we need you, right? This is a partnership between the lawmakers and grassroots folks on the ground pushing, for example, industry to be better, right? Even if we want to do it, we don't have the supplies to do it, and 200 people in the legislature are not going to magically pump out 50,000 electric vehicles.
We're getting into the thick of it, thank you. There's much more that we could talk about. I want to thank all the panelists, because we got to wrap up this Q&A. And I want to thank everyone in the audience for participating, supplying excellent questions. So thank you to everybody. I want to thank our presenters again. Thank you for standing up there and laying it out. Thanking our team that put this together, all the volunteers. Renewable Natick in the back, definitely see them opt up after this. And now we're going to receive a call to action. We're going to have a song of inspiration, and we're going to kind of get charged up because, you know, we're moving out into action. Obviously, we're facing a challenge. We're facing a major challenge as humans, as a society. And what we're doing at the Sunrise Hub is we're bringing people together, we're building community, we're going from that kind of chatting space, the talking, the thinking, then we're going to build community, we're going to kind of get it together, and we're going to take action.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you all coming out tonight. And the one thing that I want us to know, because I've got a few cards here that were saying, concrete actions, what's your next steps, how are we going to make the Green New Deal possible? Well, the first thing is that paper that you signed right there is you signing on to the Green New Deal. If you have not done so, sign up on our paper right now, and there are multiple ways you get involved. You can do state legislator active through 350 Mass and 350 Metro West. You can join us in supporting youth movement at Sunrise. Our email's behind me. At 350 Mass has also mentioned that if you want to help, there is a 350 Mass Summit on Sunday, November 3rd at Brandeis University in Waltham. You can also join Our Revolution, which is a progressive action movement going on in this area. Renewable Natick is locally sourcing and making it so that we can get to renewable energy in this community. Join one of those movements, or you can just sign up and say, I need help to figure out what I want to do. But the action is that we need to be a movement, not just action. We need to be a community, not just individuals. We need to be activists, not consumers. And by having all those things be important to us, we, Natick, can lead. I want to remind all of us that Massachusetts was one of the first states to legalize gay marriage in this area, right? Remember that. We were one of the first states to have a state-run health insurance plan, right? We can lead. Massachusetts can be the first state to have the Green New Deal be possible. But it's going to take more than just us talking. We need to act. So, what are we going to do? I mean, everybody to stand up. Stand up during this thing, did you? So, what happens at the end of our Sunrise meetings with our youth movement is that we tend to do songs, and songs that are supposed to be inspirational. Because as a social movement, we are reflecting the social movements that have existed before us, and we use a lot of their songs that are calls to action to make sure people know that we are joined in our efforts. Now, this is a very simple song called We're Gonna Rise Up, and what I'm gonna do is we're gonna do a run through. I'm gonna sing it, and you're gonna call an answer. And then when we're all done, we're gonna do it together. Does that sound good, everybody? All right. So to start, the first line is done twice. It's gonna be, we gonna rise up till it's one. Sing it. We gonna rise up till it's one. One more time. We gonna rise up till it's one. Okay, now the next line is, when the people rise up, pause, the power comes down. When the people rise up, the power comes down. All right, this one's a little bit different. When the people rise up, the power comes down. When the people rise up, the power comes down. All right, then the last one. They try to stop us, but we keep coming back. They try to stop us, but we keep coming back. One more time. They try to stop us, but we keep coming back. All right, is everybody ready to put all of that together? Let's wake ourselves up. You ready to mobilize for the Green New Deal? Is everybody ready to be part of this movement? All right. All right. On 4, I guess. I'm not much of a choral leader, so here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. We gonna rise up till it's one. We gonna rise up till it's one. Rise up. The power comes down. When the people rise up, the power comes down. They try to stop us, but we keep coming back. They try to stop us, but we keep coming back. Let's do another round, guys. We can do this.